The first thing the Navy SEAL noticed was the mop in his hand. The second was the color of his skin. And within 30 seconds, a decorated black veteran who had once carried wounded soldiers through enemy fire was being treated like a janitor who had forgotten his place. What nobody in that hallway knew was that the quiet man they were humiliating had already buried too many friends, raised a daughter alone, and survived things most people could never imagine. And before that morning was over, four generals would stand before him and do something that would leave the entire room speechless. If you believe people deserve kindness, respect, and second chances no matter where they come from, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Because sometimes the person everyone overlooks is carrying the greatest story in the room. It was 6:40 on a cold Monday morning at Fort Liberty, and Marcus Reed pushed a cleaning cart down the marble hallway of the command building. At 42, Marcus had broad shoulders, tired eyes, and the quiet posture of a man who had learned not to complain. He was a former Navy SEAL, but nobody looking at him that morning would have guessed it. His old uniform was packed away in a closet at home, along with medals he rarely touched. These days, Marcus worked a civilian maintenance job on base while raising his 12-year-old daughter, Amara, by himself. His wife had died 3 years earlier after a long illness, leaving Marcus with a child who still sometimes woke from nightmares calling for her mother. Marcus had learned to live two lives. At home, he was the father who braided Amara's hair badly, packed her lunches, checked her homework, and sat beside her bed when grief became too heavy. At work, he kept his head down and did whatever was asked. He had taken the maintenance position because the hours allowed him to get Amara to school every morning and be home before dinner. He could have pursued a different career after leaving the military, but he had discovered that peace mattered more to him than prestige. That morning, he was polishing the floor outside a conference room when Lieutenant Carter stepped around the corner. Carter was young, confident, and newly promoted. He stopped when he saw Marcus and stared at the mop bucket as if it offended him. He asked why Marcus was standing in an area reserved for senior officers. Marcus calmly explained that he had been assigned to clean the hallway before an important meeting. Carter glanced at his badge and told him that nobody had asked for an explanation. Marcus nodded and returned to his work. But Carter wasn't finished. He told Marcus that people like him were there to serve, not speak. The words landed harder than Carter probably intended, but Marcus didn't react. He simply lowered his eyes and continued wiping the floor. Then Carter told him to move his cart because 4 generals would be arriving within the hour, and he didn't want them seeing someone who looked out of place. Marcus stopped for just a second. He looked at the polished floor beneath his boots and remembered another floor from another lifetime, one stained with blood and dust in a place thousands of miles away. He remembered carrying a wounded teammate through a burning compound while bullets cracked overhead. He remembered the sound of a friend whispering his daughter's name before losing consciousness. He remembered being 29 years old and learning that courage didn't always look like fighting back. Sometimes courage meant surviving, coming home, and learning how to be gentle again. Marcus moved his cart. He didn't tell Carter that he had once served beside officers who would have recognized his name. He didn't explain that the small scar above his eyebrow came from a mission that had never appeared in the news. And he certainly didn't mention that the Distinguished Service Medal locked inside his bedroom safe belonged to a man Carter had just ordered to disappear from his hallway. An hour later, the command building became unusually quiet. 4 generals arrived together for a private meeting. Staff members hurried through the corridors, checking documents and straightening chairs. Marcus was replacing a light fixture near the conference room when Carter noticed him again. In front of several officers, Carter told Marcus to leave immediately. When Marcus politely explained that he needed to finish the repair, Carter's temper flared. He accused Marcus of being disrespectful and told him that civilians were expected to know their place. Then, in a moment that would soon be replayed in everyone's mind, Carter grabbed Marcus's work badge and held it up for everyone to see, saying that a maintenance worker had no business arguing with a commissioned officer. Marcus stood completely still. There was no anger in his face. Only exhaustion. Then a young administrative officer noticed something unusual. Beneath Marcus's work shirt, partially visible near his collar, was a faded tattoo, a small insignia known only to members of a highly classified special operations unit. She stared at it, then looked at Marcus again. Before she could say anything, the conference room doors opened. 4 generals stepped into the hallway. The first was a 4-star Army general. Behind him came a Marine general, an Air Force general, and a retired Navy admiral who had been invited as a special advisor. They were speaking quietly until they saw Marcus. The 4 men stopped. Marcus looked up. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then the Navy admiral's expression changed completely. He recognized him. He walked toward Marcus slowly, his eyes fixed on the veteran standing beside a cleaning cart. The admiral asked Marcus if he was the same man who had served on a classified rescue operation 13 years earlier. Marcus hesitated before quietly confirming it. The admiral's eyes became glassy. He turned to the other 3 generals and said that Marcus Reed wasn't a maintenance worker who had somehow wandered into their hallway. He was the man who had carried 7 wounded service members out of an ambushed compound while under continuous enemy fire. He was the man who had refused evacuation until every member of his team was accounted for. He was the man who had later disappeared from military life after his wife became ill because he wanted to spend his remaining years raising his daughter. The hallway went silent. Carter's face drained of color. But the story was not finished. The Army general stepped forward and told Marcus that he had personally reviewed the after-action report from that mission. He said Marcus had saved lives that day, including the life of someone who later became a general. The Marine general then stepped beside him and thanked Marcus for something even more personal. Years earlier, Marcus had carried his younger brother to safety during a deployment. Marcus lowered his eyes. He said he had only been doing his job. The 4 generals exchanged a look. Then, one after another, they raised their hands in salute. The sound of 4 pairs of boots coming together echoed through the marble hallway. Marcus froze. He hadn't expected that. He had spent years avoiding attention, believing that the best part of his life was behind him. Yet there he stood with a mop bucket beside him while 4 generals saluted a man who had been told minutes earlier that he was only there to serve. Marcus finally raised his hand in return. His eyes filled with tears. Not because of the generals. Because for the first time in years, somebody had reminded him that his sacrifices had not disappeared simply because he had gone home. Carter stepped forward, ashamed, and apologized. Marcus listened without interrupting. Then he told him something that stayed with everyone in that hallway. He said respect wasn't something a uniform automatically created, and it wasn't something a job title could purchase. Respect was something people gave because every human being carried a story you might never see. Carter lowered his head. Marcus didn't demand punishment. He didn't ask for revenge. He simply asked Carter to remember the lesson the next time he met someone he thought was beneath him. That evening, Marcus returned home before dinner. Amara ran toward him, wrapped her arms around his waist, and asked why he looked different. Marcus smiled and told her that someone had reminded him of something important. She asked what. He looked at his daughter, the child he had protected through every storm life had thrown at them, and told her that sometimes people forget who they are when the world stops clapping for them. Then he knelt beside her and said that being strong didn't mean making others feel small. Real strength meant lifting people when they were down. Amara hugged him again. And Marcus finally understood that coming home had never been the end of his service. It had simply changed its meaning. If this story touched your heart, please don't just watch and scroll away. Like the video, share it with someone who needs a reminder that dignity belongs to everyone, and subscribe to Kindness Corner so more stories like this can reach people who need them. And before we end, I want you to leave a special comment: respect has no rank. Write those words if you believe every person deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of their job, their appearance, or where they come from. Because you never truly know who is standing in front of you. The quiet man cleaning the hallway might once have carried heroes through fire. The tired woman serving your coffee might be raising 3 children alone. The stranger you ignore might be fighting a battle you cannot see. And sometimes, the person you believe has nothing to offer is the very person who has already given everything. Marcus Reed never needed 4 generals to tell him who he was. But that morning, when 4 powerful men stood in silence and saluted the man holding a mop, everyone else finally remembered. A person's dignity does not come from the uniform they wear. It comes from the life they have lived, the people they have loved, the battles they have survived, and the kindness they choose to show when nobody is watching.